Hi, and welcome back to the Shane Plays Out of the Abyss Notes series as I continue to share my notes from leading a group at my friendly local game store through Out of the Abyss, the 5th edition Underdark adventure. So, um, when we last left our intrepid party, they had left the Tome of Caim, I don't know how to say it, Lost Tome of Caim or whatever, and they had they were doing a short rest, and they had encountered Globagul, the sentient gelatinous cube, who they had left with the Myconids 2 or 3 days earlier, and they had taken some time in the tomb, done a couple of basically long rest periods. One was a real long rest, another one was creating a contrivance to carry the invisible chest. And they had caught up, or Globagul had caught up with them, and they were doing a short rest and identifying some magic items and whatnot. And then they were very close to Blingdenstone, the Deep Gnome City. So that's kind of where everything was at. One thing I had somebody put in the comments, and I appreciate this. They pointed out that the tomb is just saturated with Fair's Rest, that magical field or whatever that's in the Underdark. And if you're in areas that are very concentrated with Fair's Rest, you can have wild magic and other things. And one of the things I forgot to do was they should have rolled a saving throw for a potential another level of madness for taking a long rest in the tomb, because there was so much concentrated Fair's Rest. So viewers, I love your comments. Thank you so much for pointing that out, because that totally went over my head. Just didn't even catch that. And that's one of the more difficult things of keeping up with the Underdark is, if you're in the Fair's Rest areas that have a lot of this magic, focused sort of magic, that it doesn't allow, I think, teleporting into or out of. It's hard to scry into areas with Fair's Rest. It can cause wild magic and other things. It'll also, if you take a long rest in it, you can potentially get some madness, because it has been infected with the madness of the demon lords in the Underdark. So those kind of tips are always welcome when people are watching these videos. I really appreciate it. Another thing that I don't want to forget to mention, that I was reading up on getting ready for Blingdenstone, and I was kind of going through some online. I watched a few videos. It didn't help a whole lot, but I did a. Hold on a second. That was my phone, and I 100% apologize for that. I'm going to put it on silent right now, because I can tell from the number that it's an automated call that's been trying to call me forever. And I'm like, leave a message or stop calling me. Right? Leave a message, stop calling me. But anyway, another thing I'm going to start doing, I got this idea from reading other people. They were telling me, just mentioned one of the things they were doing in the Underdark, and I thought it was a great idea. And one of my players mentioned that I guess that's a flaw you could take, or something, possibly. I don't remember reading it. But because there's so many nightmares in the Underdark, you never want your characters or your players or whatever to be completely comfortable in the Underdark. There's this constantly mounting sense of tension and fear and really terror, because you got the demon lords. It's getting worse and worse, and all the, everywhere you go, there's some sort of madness. Well, there's nightmares, and I mentioned to my players pretty often, hey, you're having nightmares occasionally, or not occasionally, fairly often, not every night, but fairly often. Well, somebody mentioned on an online post as I was reading up on Blingdenstone, and I was like, that's a great idea. I'm going to start doing it. Every time you do a long rest, you've got a 10% chance that your nightmares, or that you had nightmares that were so bad that you got no benefit from the long rest. And I really like that idea. So it's yet another reminder that things are not right in the Underdark. The Underdark's never totally right, but things are really wrong in the Underdark right now. And also, you don't want them to get so comfortable that they just, hey, we're just going to hang out in the Underdark, because you want this sense of we're trying to get out of the Underdark. Now, I suppose if you let your characters or your players uh, play all Underdark races and you kind of change things up a little bit, that's fine. But the basic conceit, thesis, whatever theme of the first part, and this adventure is split into two parts. The first part, where up through like level 7, you're trying to get out. You were captured, taken to the Underdark, and you're just trying to get out. And so this is another kind of reminder and reasons, like, we really don't want to be down here. Um, and I think it's a nice way, without putting people on rails, as it were, to remind them and encourage them. You sooner or later you want to get out of the Underdark. Now you can run around different parts of the Underdark wherever you want, but really you're kind of, you're never 100% at home in the Underdark. You want to get out. Um, so I think that's a nice thing I'm going to start doing. Another thing, Blingdenstone is one of the main places where you can get up to the surface. Now the thing is, the deep gnomes, they have a policy. I mean, it's written right in the book. It's like a law that strangers cannot purchase or borrow maps. So it's like, oh yeah, we could tell you how to get out, but we don't share that information with strangers. And there's reasons that are laid out in the book why they're very reclusive and kind of distrustful. They haven't had the best time of it. In fact, Blingdenstone itself is being rebuilt because it was almost completely wiped out by the Drow, in retaliation for the Deep Gnomes working against them in the past. The Deep Gnomes were normally reclusive. They met Dritz Do'Urden, got involved in some stuff against the Drow, and then eventually the Drow took their revenge and basically wiped out Blingdenstone and killed a lot of Deep Gnomes, and then took the others into slavery in Menzoberranzan. So, not, and so they're very, strangers come along and they're like, whoa, so and there's good reasons provided for that. But yeah, there's some discussion in my party. Like, most of the party is like, yeah, let's find a way out. And then, one of the party members was like, well, maybe we could go to Gracklestug. And so that's interesting. I'm not going to tell him, because what's supposed to happen, and if you're a player watching this and you're playing this, whether it's in my group or somebody else's group, and you haven't gotten to this point yet, it's better if you don't listen. It's really better if you don't know everything about an adventure. Go in, be surprised. And don't, and don't let, even if you keep it to yourself and don't tell the rest of your group, the way you react to stuff could change because you know stuff, and then that can affect how your group enjoys the game. So, don't listen to this stuff, especially what I'm about to talk about for the next couple of minutes. Skip forward. Um, what's supposed to happen in Out of the Abyss at this point, about level 7, they're supposed to find a way out. And I'm fully intending, because they've done a lot in the Underdark already, I'm fully intending for Blingdenstone to be their way out. And then they're supposed to chill for like a month or something up in the surface, and then basically Eldith or somebody from Gauntlegrim comes and approaches them and says, would you please come back and help us? And then they go back down into the Underdark. So it's kind of split in half at around level 7. Now, my character is actually, one of the problems I'm having is I've had, for the most part, now right now we're at 6, 7 players, maybe 8, depending on how many people show up. But in the past, we've had 10, 11, 12. I mean, it's never been just 4 or 5 players. It's always been at least 6. So they haven't been getting as much individual experience as they could have, because, even when I put in extra monsters, or I've awarded experience here and there and stuff like that, they're still like 1,000 XP away from 5th level. So I've got to, and there's a lot happening around Blingdenstone. There's a lot in Blingdenstone. There's a lot in the local stuff around within a few, like a day or half a day's journey of Blingdenstone. But I've got to get them up a couple of levels. And if I have to, I'll milestone them. But I really don't like milestoning. There's nothing wrong with the concept in and of itself, but just my role-playing background, I milestoning is just weird to me, especially in D&D, because, as I was talking with Russ Morrissey of Ian World for the radio show recently, and that podcast version will go out soon. In fact, that might go out before this goes out. No, this will go out before then, before the radio show, and then the podcast extra, which has more of the interview than made it in the radio show. We're talking about the like D&D, like the XP is codified, it's codified into the if I do this or if I kill this, I get this many experience points. So the milestoning thing, it's just not my thing. I've done it a little bit, but I prefer to, you killed that, or you did this, or you did that, you got XP and you leveled up. So I think I'm going to have to start increasing the challenge of their encounters, maybe throwing in a couple extra monsters or something, or upping the monsters' toughness and giving a few extra XP for it, or something. So, but anyway, that's another discussion. But if you're showing up at Blingdenstone about the time that my party is, and it's one of the main ways out, and you want Blingdenstone to be the way out, keep in mind that by the book, now you can do whatever you want, but by the book, they're supposed to be about 7th level when they go out. So, and then the adventure itself goes to level 15. So there's still a lot more to it after that. And I've also got to think about once in that midpoint, that break, assuming that they leave Blingdenstone or leave the Underdark after Blingdenstone, do I just the next week say, well, it's been a month, and I'm kind of leaning towards this, do a short 3 or 4 session adventure just for something different, and then go back into the Underdark. So I've got to figure that out as well. Now, one other thing I had to deal with on the last session that I wasn't expecting is I had a player who didn't show up for about 3 nights or 3 sessions, something like that. And his brother was like, yeah, he's coming back. Well, finally he was like, he just can't come because of his work schedule. I said, man, that's totally fine. I said, he's welcome back. I'd love to have him. If he can't make it, I understand. And he had had the only straight up magic user of the entire party. Now there are some party members that can throw spells, but that player had at that point the only, I think he had a warlock. It was the only straight up magic user in their entire party. Now they have a cleric, but they didn't have the mobile turret, if you will, magic user. So I said, okay, because his brother, who was still playing, had just introduced a new character, like within a session or two, because their other character had died charging Zuktmoy, which I think I was listening to a Wizards of the Coast thing, and it's like I'm saying it wrong. It's like Zugatmoy or something like that, but I say Zuktmoy. So but that character died, so he introduced a new one. He introduced a melee fighter, a dwarf, because the fighter, the party has a lot of varied skills, but they don't have like a straight up melee fighter other than Eldith, who's an NPC. So I said, okay, so here's the deal. I said, because of this circumstance, you don't have a magic user and your character just got introduced. I said, if you want, you could convert that character to something else because you've just barely introduced that character. And I said, the only reason is because when if you want a magic user, now it's up to the group if you guys want to have a magic user or not. And I'm trying not to have a lot of character swapping. I've allowed it in the past in other campaigns, but this one, I'm just like, let's try to play the characters that we have. Because there's already enough kind of up and down disruption, if you will, since we play at a store. If somebody shows up and wants to play, we work them in. So there's enough, narrative disruption that way sometimes. Although it works out pretty well. We usually just say play Eldith, and it works out fine. And if they like it, they roll up another character and jump in. So, he said, well, okay, I might do that. So, okay, that's fine. So then they called me or texted me like a day or two later and said, no, I'm just going to stay with my character. Okay, that's fine, cool. And then they called me like a day before the session and said, hey, I just want to make sure you saw my text that I'm staying with the same character. And I had a question about something else. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't reply to your text. I thought, and I didn't. That was my bad. I should have. But I said, yeah, that's fine. I appreciate it. Thanks for letting me know. That makes things easier. Although I would have, allowed that. and then he said, my brother actually may be coming back. And I went, okay. I said, well, then that solves everything. And he said, well, but he just moved and he lost his character sheet. So he didn't have his character sheet for his warlock. I said, okay. I said, so he can he can make a new character. He can do the standard array, or he can do the point buy system, and um, the guy I'm talking with, the brother that was staying in the game no matter what, had rolled dice in front of me for the attributes to make a new character. And before he said, well, I'm just going to stick with who I'm using. I hope I'm not being too confusing with this. And I said, okay. I said, so can use standard array, point buy system, or the dice you rolled. You can do that. And he went, okay, that's cool. So I'm like, all right. And that was the end of it. So then I walk in Tuesday night. That's when we play on Tuesday nights. And before I even get a chance to set my bags down, he said, yeah, I ended up rolling up a Drow sorcerer, and my brother's a dragonborn fighter. And I'm like, I was kind of like a deer in the headlights. And I'm like, and I did not react well on this. I wish I could go back and, you don't get do-overs in life, but I wish I could go back. And I was like, that is completely the opposite of what we talked about. And keep in mind, you come in, and players don't, you let your DM get in and get settled, and it's just like mom or dad coming home. Give them a chance to walk through the door, and before you blast them with something, because they may not be at their best at that moment. They're like, what? They haven't had a chance to chill out for a second. So I'm like, that is completely opposite of what we talked about. And I said, you told me twice that you were keeping your character, and that your brother, who was there, was gonna roll up a new character or whatever. So, and then his brother, who had been missing for about 3 sessions, said, look, I don't have to play tonight. And I put my hand on his shoulder and I said, this isn't what that's about. I said, I totally want you here. And I did want him there. I do want him there. I said, man, I want you here. I said, but this, now I'm kind of thrown for a loop. And he said, well, he wanted to play a fighter, and I really want to play a magic user, and so we just did this like in the last hour. And I'm like, so I'm going to do a timeout here, and I'm going to try to give you some insight into why, as a DM, this was frustrating to me. One, I've tried to keep the character swapping in this campaign to a minimum. Two, I broke my own rule because of an unusual circumstance. That said, if you want to play a different character, you can. And I felt like it was one of those situations where I gave a player an inch and they took a mile. And after telling me twice before the session, I'm sticking with my old character, they show up with a completely different character. This is why it's problematic for me to have to deal with it like that. Like, whoa. Because now I have to, I don't know how do I work them in? They're on the verge of Blingdenstone. So I've got to figure out a way to work them in narratively. I don't want to just say, hey, they're there. That's a poor story experience. I want to come up with, some reason why they're there. And two, he decided to play a Drow. Drow are not allowed into Blingdenstone. You have to make a persuasion check of 15 or higher to get in, unless like Jim Jar is with you or something, and who's a deep gnome NPC and vouches for the Drow character. Which Jim Jar is not with him. Jim Jar left him back in Gracklestug. Said, I'm heading to Blingdenstone, and he took off. So I was a little bit annoyed and a little bit frustrated. And I said, okay, so, so what happened to the other character? What was their motivation for leaving? And he went, I don't know. I hadn't thought of that. And then I went, why is your character here? How do these two know each other? And they had a little bit of a backstory that they were from an quorum, and they were searching for deserters in the Underdark. And they've gotten separated from their main party because there were Drow they had hired to bring them into the Underdark, and the Drow had double-crossed them and all this stuff. And I just peppered him with all these questions that I have to think of as a DM. Like, well, what about this? What about that? How how do they know each other? Why do they think they're the deserters that they're looking for are in Blingdenstone? Why did the previous character leave? All this stuff. I mean, and there were other questions I just peppered them with, and I was being kind of a jerk. I'm sorry, but I was purposefully trying to make the point that this is what I have to think about when you spring a character on me. If I care at all about the story experience of everybody at the table, this is what I have to think about. And a lot of times I have to do it on the fly. I would have preferred, I'd have preferred that if you kept your character because you told me twice you were keeping that character, right? And then we would have figured out something with the new character coming in with your brother. But that not being the case, because I did offer, hey, you could change your character up or whatever. Give me some kind of heads up. Don't hit me with that the minute I walk through the door, because I've been studying Blingdenstone, and I put extra time into studying Blingdenstone because it can be a little bit confusing. So I'm trying to figure all this stuff out, and then that. So I felt like I was a little bit of a jerk. I mean, I wasn't like cussing or anything like that, but I was purposefully, I think, putting a little bit of pressure on this player with my questions so that they would kind of get, well, this is why I'm a little bit like, whoa, why did you do this to me? So anyway, um, if it helps any, within 10-15 minutes of playing, we're all laughing and having a good time, and I'm making sure that this character gets to shine and all that. I'm not going to punish the player as we move forward, but I was just like, man, that is completely opposite of what we talked about. So, and this player likes to swap characters pretty often. So I felt like I don't know, enough of all that. Maybe you would have handled it differently. But what we ended up doing was we got to Blingdenstone. There's these huge steps that go up to the main gate, and the main party gets there, and they see this drow and this dragonborn off to the side of the gate, like arguing with the deep gnomes, like trying to get in, having a heated discussion. Another thing about this drow was raised on the surface by wood elves, but physically is a drow and has the drow racial characteristics. So there you go. Not really an Underdark denizen, if you will. So here's what I did with Blingdenstone. I spent a lot of time on other stuff. I'll summarize Blingdenstone fairly quickly. First of all, Blingdenstone can be kind of confusing. And what I mean by that, it's not confusing like Gracklestug. Gracklestug has so many moving parts. It's wow, you really need a flowchart to keep up with how all the different quests relate. Where Blingdenstone is confusing is that it says strangers are not allowed entry into Blingdenstone until they've proven themselves by helping the community. But the only way to help them and prove themselves is to get inside Blingdenstone and pick up quests. Maybe I missed something. I don't know. I mean, there is stuff you can do outside of Blingdenstone, but not a lot. I mean, there's a little bit, but most of it is inside Blingdenstone. So they say, hey, can you go here and here and here and do this and that and the other? So the entire session. Oh, and by the way, they did travel briefly with Glabagul, but while they were in their long rest, he was like, hey, gotta go, and he just kept going. And, eventually they got to Blingden, and Glabagul was gone. They don't know where Glabagul is. Now, Glabagul's going to come back into the mix, because there's definitely stuff going on with oozes and puddings in Blingdenstone. So I will have him show back up. Rasharu, the Myconid explorer leader, Circle of Explorers leader, is still with them for now. He went with them, went with them into Blingdenstone. And that, they keep saying, is Rasharu left some? Not yet. So Rasharu's a curious explorer. Rasharu will probably hang in Blingdenstone a bit. It is not going to be a major asset to the party, like in battles or anything like that. But it will hang out and kind of be there because it's very interested in Blingdenstone. So this entire session ended up just being a role-playing session. There was no combat. It was basically getting to Blingdenstone, describing Blingdenstone, and then they basically had an audience with the de facto king and queen, even though they're not called the king and queen. And then they ended up uh, kind of finding a base of operations in an inn, I think called the Foaming Mug, um, which was kind of built for foreigners uh, before Blingdenstone was sacked, and it's being kind of reopened as an inn with a very, very friendly innkeeper. So, a second. One thing that you'll want to do with Blingdenstone is you'll really want to kind of explain the suspicious, not quite hostile, but suspicious kind of closed nature of the deep gnomes to strangers. Now, as you get to know them, and as they become to trust you, or they come to trust you, they become more like the lighthearted, joyful gnomes of their surface world. But, just straight up, if they don't know you and you come cruising along, they're kind of closed, suspicious, not quite hostile. And some of them might even try to steal from you. But the way Outer Blingdenstone, which is this sort of series of caves and passageways that are leading up to the main gates, you'll start encountering deep gnomes here and there, and there's like farms and forges and some stuff like that. It's more like the rural deep gnomes, and they have a little bit more madness, a little bit more paranoia than the ones that are living in the city. Um, and the city itself, again, is a city that's being reclaimed. It was pretty much sacked and, in a lot of ways, destroyed by the Drow, a long time ago, and now it's being rebuilt, and it's been being rebuilt for about 10 years. And so there's kind of a community established, but there's still, you got issues. There's were-rats, there's oozes and puddings. There's all kinds of crazy random encounters you can have. There's ghosts. There's an area called the Rock Blight. There's an area with this deep gnome called the Pudding King, who's under the influence of a demon lord, and puddings and oozings and all that. Oozes, all that stuff are kind of involved with that. But there's also a thriving community of deep gnomes that are slowly reclaiming Blingdenstone and trying to bring it back. Uh, and it's one thing I'll mention. They get to the gates, and the gates are very fortress-like and defensible. And then they go through this maze thing that, again, is very defensible. And then they go through this thing called the Gauntlet, which is like a tunnel, which is, again, very defensible. So one of the things I really stress with the players is the deep gnomes, they don't seem like they ever want to have to be invaded again. I mean, they're not playing around. This place is defensible. And that's I really stress that. The guards were not outright hostile, but like, what's your business here? Why should we care? And the way that the main group got in was, they mentioned, in the book says this, if you mention that you're fleeing the Drow, they're like, yep, come in, we'll take you to, the chief and his wife, who are basically the co-rulers of Blingdenstone, the Diggermatoks. I think it's, Dorbo and Cine Diggermatok. They're not king and queen yet, but they're basically the de facto king and queen, and when, the community gets to the point where they'll have a king and queen, it'll probably be these two. So that's all it really took, was they mentioned, we've been running from the Drow. We were captured by the Drow. We were running by the Drow, trying to get out. And they're like, come in. And so they get assigned an escort of 4 deep gnomes. Again, they're not super friendly, but they're not exactly hostile. They're like, we'll take you to, it's Dorbo and Cine Diggermatok. And the bard, who basically spoke up and was being the leader of the situation, because he spoke one of the languages that the deep gnomes did. As soon as he mentioned we're running from the Drow, they're like, all right, we'll take you to, was it Dorbo and Cine Diggermatok, and you can you can talk to them. So the Drow and the Dragonborn, who are new characters being introduced in, everybody sees them off to the side, arguing with the Deep Gnomes basically, because they're wanting to get in to find deserters. And all the players know what's going on. I mean, they know that these are the two new players over there arguing with whatever. But I'm trying to let this role play and play out. And so basically the Drow, the Deep Gnomes are just telling. They don't really have an issue with the Dragonborn, but the Drow's like, you're not coming in here. You're Drow. You're not coming in here. And had my player approached me ahead of time and say I want to play a Drow, I would have said, it might not be the best idea because it's going to make things harder in Blingdenstone. And I made it hard every step of the way in Blingdenstone because the book is very clear that Drow do not do well in Blingdenstone. They're treated with deep suspicion. And I made that very apparent. So, the players kept, the main group of players was being taken in. And the other group, or the two new players, they're arguing and trying to get in. And, they said, we want to do a persuasion. So, well, that's fine because, the book says basically that's about the only way a Drow, if you don't get vouched for by, another Deep Gnome, the only way you're going to get in is through a persuasion attempt, 15 or better. And they, whipped up some, oh, well, I told you we got separated from our people, and there's our group right there. Yeah, we're supposed to go in with them. And, rolled like a 13. And I'm like, okay, I'll give you one more chance. Rolled, and they did good, like an unnatural 21 or something like that. So I said, okay, this guard buys it. And so the Drow and the Dragonborn just slip right behind the main group that's going in. And they get hey, we're in, here's the gate, here's the maze, here's all its defensible things, here's the gauntlet, and now we're into Blingdenstone. And and the guard's like not being, he's kind of like, this is this is that, this is this, kind of showing them things. I don't know how well you can see this, but when you get into Blingdenstone, that's the map of Blingdenstone. And it's kind of almost like a dungeon. I mean, it's like a series of caves connected by it's like alleys, and it's kind of confusing to describe. So, for now, I'm playing it like, unless the party is being given very specific instructions how to get somewhere, they don't know. They're just going to have to try to find it and explore. But they're basically taken directly to Diggermatok Hall, is it? Yeah, Diggermatok Hall, which is sort of a cavern that's sort of the government seat of government. A lot of people scurrying around, very busy, and then there's kind of a raised area that has, I think, a couple of tables and chair, and the Dorbo and Cine Diggermatok kind of looking at each other and conducting business. So they're led there to talk to Dorbo and Cine. Long story short, they talk to the characters, get their story, quiz the characters. I threw in a lot more role-playing flavor to it than that, but and then they're given a couple of quests to prove their worth, because it was basically very clear that we'll help you if you help us. And one of the things that came up naturally by the players was like, can you tell us how to get out of here? And they're like, well, we don't share our maps or sell maps to strangers, but you prove your worth around here and we'll help you. So they made that very clear. And one of the things they got was they've got an issue with the were-rats. There's a were-rat enclave inside Blingdenstone, and the male leader, Dorbo, he's the one that's back. He wants this area, and he basically is like, let's just go wipe out the were-rats. Cine would rather, well, these were-rats used to be deep gnomes, and I'd rather integrate them back into the community, but they both want the terrain back. They want the area of Blingdenstone back into the main community. So one of the things that they were doing is asked to go investigate the were-rat problem and see if there was any way to work a solution, or if it's just going to have to be armed force, basically. And the other thing they mentioned, and we're having a little bit of an ooze and pudding problem, but we'd really kind of let you look at the um, the were rat thing first, and because the ooze thing, and in here it's called Operation Ooze there, and then the other was Operation Exterminate with a question mark, and that's the were rat one. Uh, the pudding thing is once the pudding king thing happens, it kicks off a whole thing that turns into the battle for Blingdenstone. And I'm not quite. I want them to do, if possible. Now, if they just go straight to and deal with the pudding king stuff, that's their choice. I'm not going to force them into not doing it, but I would rather gently encourage them to do some other stuff because there's a lot of cool quests, and we're going to be in Blingdenstone for a while and in this area, so we'll be covering other quests and areas. And deep, there's a sentient mist that's pretty cool. I think called Ogremok's Bane, and the Rock Blight is cool. And there's some areas outside of Blingdenstone, that they can go do stuff in. So we'll be in Blingdenstone for a while. But the way I played the king and the queen, even though they're not really kings, they're just chiefs, but they're the de facto king and queen, was they were very smooth diplomatically, you know, asking a lot of questions, this and that. And when they got certain bits of information, because Jim Jar came up a couple of times, and the Demon Lord stuff came up and all that, they were like, people would run over and they go, and the people, oh, they'd write things down and run off. So it's very, this kind of busy leader kind of thing. I have no idea how surprised a deep gnome would be to meet a tiefling, because a tiefling is a major established race of D&D. But just for fun, I had Dorbo and Cine be kind of intrigued by the tieflings and also the dragonborn. So there was a little bit of interplay there and discussion, and of course there was a deep hostility to the drow. And in fact, the drow had to make another persuasion check to even stay in the conversation with Dorbo and Cine, which they did. So did a lot of that. But long story short, basically said you're welcome to be in the community as long as you don't cause trouble. But if you really want our help, you've got to prove yourself. Is basically what it came down to. I think that's even if they don't mention the drow being on the run from the drow, I think taking the characters straight to Dorbo and Cine Diggermatok is the best way to kick things off in Blingdenstone. Because there's so many different things that could happen, so many different possible places to go once you're allowed inside. I think that's a good place to give them a foundation to start. And to also make it really clear that, hey, you're going to have to scratch our back before we scratch yours. And there's also, like, in the book, there's the, I forget what it's called. I forget what the rule is called. But there's a scale of whether NPCs like you or not. And it can be from I actively dislike you to I really like you to I'm neutral on you, whatever. And there's times in here where you roll to move the party's standing with the deep gnomes up or down on that. So that's a rule you'll want to pay attention to if you want to play it by the book. So the other thing they did is they recommended to the party that they stay at the Foaming Mug. They went to the Foaming Mug, were given directions, and the Tappy Foamstrap, who's the innkeeper, she's just so excited to have, because she has people come in and sit around and drink every day, but she doesn't have people staying in the inn, because this inn is built for foreigners, for larger people than gnomes. So she's just totally giving them free food. Now, she still charges them for the rooms, but she's giving them free food and drinks and all this stuff, and peppering them with questions about being adventurers. Of course, the drow walks in, everything's like, needle scratching a record. And, my player's like, yeah, but I'm not really a drow. I was raised by wood elves. I said, I don't want to offend anybody with this analogy, but I even double checked the players, and they said, yeah, we're not offended. That makes sense. But this is what it's like if you're a drow walking into Blingdenstone, especially into a bar in Blingdenstone, it's like walking into a Jewish community in like Europe not long after World War II, and there's like Jewish people in a bar. It's like a Jewish bar, and you walk in full Nazi uniform. I mean, that's the reception you're getting. And again, I said I'm not trying to offend anybody. I said I'm just trying to make a point. They said, no, we totally get that. That's a good way to describe it. And at that point, the player got it's like, oh, this is really an issue for me being a drow. I'm like, yes, it's really an issue for you to be a drow in Blingdenstone. So, but that doesn't mean it can't be done. But it's you immediately are disliked. Very disliked. Uh, but anyway, we're playing through it, and it's leading to some interesting role playing moments, which is good. You can have uncomfortable stuff, and if it's leading to good role playing, and it is, and we're all having fun. We put the initial discussion of it would have been better if you didn't change the characters that was all set aside, and we moved forward, and we had a lot of fun. So I just want to make that clear. And then they were like, well, we want to do some shopping. So they got rooms. They got some rumors out of the party, out of the inn. And there's rooms. The only person, the cleric, went down there because was curious. I want to learn about their religion. Everybody else went to bed. So the cleric was down there, and I was rolling and giving her some of the rumors and hearsay that you can get in the foaming mug. So long story short, because this one's gone longer than normal, they went to the what's it called? Oh, there's the Caves of Clatter, and that's where you can have weapons and armor made by weaponsmiths and armorsmiths. And they had some custom stuff ordered to be silvered. And so it's like everything's like double the price. If it's in the player's handbook, you can basically get it at double the price. And I allowed them to be able to order some silvered. They're getting normal weapons that are silvered. Figuring out how long it seemed like if I went by the book, it was going to take like a couple of weeks to have this stuff made. I said it'll be 3 days. I still charged them double price, but I said it's going to be 3 days before the stuff you order is ready. And then they went to the Trader's Grotto. And what happens at the Trader's Grotto? That's like the main marketplace. But as soon as you get there, there's a gelatinous cube attack. And there's 2 gelatinous cubes that are going to attack, but I think I'm going to have 3 or 4 attack, because they need XP. So that's basically what happened in Blingdenstone. I'm really looking forward to Blingdenstone. I think this is going to be a really good area, and it's a lot of interesting NPCs and stuff like that. So sorry this one went so long. I'd love to have your comments and feedback and that sort of thing in the video or the comments on YouTube. Leave it a thumbs up. And again, there was no combat at all. This was a purely role-playing session. We had a lot of fun with it, and players even mentioned, sometimes it's just fun to do just RP. And I said, yep. And we had a great time. But at the very beginning of next session, they're going to be rolling initiative with these gelatinous cubes attacking Trader's Grotto, which should help them earn some favor with the deep gnomes. So, and no, one of them is not going to be Globagool. That's now how I'm going to reintroduce Globagool into the situation. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Leave a thumbs up and a comment on the video in YouTube. That helps me out a lot. And we will catch you next time on Shameplay.